don't we screen share the memo? And I thought what I'd do is just kind of walk through it a little bit. When we get it up there, there's a table at the top that if you've had a chance to look at the memo, you'll see is the place where we sort of summarize the content of the rest. And there's a couple of, we organized this by section, 12A sections. So I'll just kind of go in order. And for a couple of these, we've linked down below this table in the relevant section, longer memos that capture some of the research we've done on that topic. So I'll just mention where we have those longer memos. And one of the places is actually on this first one, 12A1, criteria for proposed alternative pathways to professional certification and cross endorsements. So this is one where we have a longer memo where we've captured our research. And really what we looked for is examples from other states that have recognized different pathways to higher levels of certification where they do have a tiered certification system. And we've tried to document the different pathways that states offer. National board certification is one. Some places allow professional development points to count towards higher levels of licensure. And then there are examples in there of programs that states designate as alternative pathways. From that, and also from research we did just in like the research literature on the sort of connection between the master's degree in particular and the kind of purpose of tiered licensure, we also gleaned a couple of criteria that could be part of the criteria that this board considers as it's making a decision about this. So those are kind of listed all the way to the right there. And the two ones that sort of stood out the most in terms of like the goals of having tiered licensing systems is one that you want to know that the pathway motivates educators to continue to develop their teaching knowledge and skills, and that the pathway should sort of validate that in fact the educator has reached a threshold level of teaching experience and expertise. So that's all set forth in more detail in that memo. I think like clearly there would be other criteria you might want to consider, and to the extent you want additional research on this topic, we would be happy to provide that. One sort of layer down that we could provide is perhaps speaking to people in some of these states that we've showcased in this memo to just get a better grasp of their process and their criteria than what's available sort of publicly. One thing to note here is that we were not able to complete the research on potential criteria or different pathways for cross endorsement. We've started that, but there's still more work to do there. So that is not in that memo right now. I'm just going to go through and then we can stop and see what questions you all have. In terms of these next two sections, what I know that you discussed these last time as being somewhat overlapping, sections A2 and A3. A2 is on the alignment of educator preparation programs with revised endorsement codes. So here we've sort of indicated that we don't think there's any additional work to do at this time to generate alignment. The endorsement codes have been updated for the expansion for the secondary grades that went into effect last year. And so those are already reflected in the updated endorsement codes. As for the ones that have to do with the elementary certificate going down to pre-K, we're just I know that's going to be a topic of today's conversation, but we're suggesting here that there's no additional work that needs to be done at this time, just that there's, you'd want to monitor alignment going forward when they come into effect. So we can answer questions about that, but in terms of the next section here on the adequacy and relevance of existing certification endorsement areas, there is a process right now we've learned at CSDE to actively monitor the adequacy of existing endorsement areas, and there's a process for adding codes under certain circumstances. So basically when there's sort of a critical mass of people who are trying to come in under a particular type of endorsement area, a code might be added. Before that time, there's a process where the the person who's seeking that will just get an endorsement code that's sort of most closely related to that endorsement area. And I'm sure the SDE can say a lot more about how that works. So we were just recommending here that we use that same process for any additional endorsement codes that you're considering. In terms of the middle grades endorsement, given the discussion you all had last time, we just sort of confirmed that it's best not to phase that out, so that folks who are coming in from out of state or who potentially are people who are teaching in elementary and want to just teach up through middle but not do the coursework for high school can continue to get that endorsement code. And then finally, there's a list here to the right of places where you might want to do some tweaking. It's a combination of sort of consolidating, renaming, or transferring some of the endorsement codes to the historic. So there's a linked document in this memo to a list of endorsement codes that the state maintains, and you'll see from that that there's sort of current and historic endorsement codes. And so there's a few that we would recommend based on our conversations with Jen and Julianne, and your conversations the last meeting, kind of moving down to historic. So just to kind of go over some of those. The first one here is about these two endorsement codes, 112 and 113. I know that there's going to be discussion today about creating a new birth through 3 endorsement area. And so if that were to happen, this is just about the idea that that could replace those other endorsement codes. There's a couple here which we would recommend potentially moving down to the historic section because there's limited use cases. And then again, in terms of adding new endorsement codes, we're recommending here that you could just, sort of monitor that with the current process that exists based on demand. And then the second to last thing here is about renaming endorsements with outdated nomenclature. For example, home economics is one example of that. I think there's one more in the body of the memo itself. And then this last thing is just about, as we were doing this, and some of you may recall that there was a lot of work put into just trying to understand like the patchwork of law that has like sort of been passed over the years that are making changes to this entire like area, but including in terms of endorsement areas. And this is really just about the idea that like all of the sort of legal requirements in terms of endorsement codes, or the legal authority for endorsement codes, should just be in one place, because right now it's kind of like a forensic exercise to figure out like what changes have been made via law and therefore how they should be updated on the list that the state maintains. And so it might just be easier to have that all like live in one place. And there are some states that do that. They just have them all in one place, either in statute or regulation. Okay, so continuing on to section A4, implementation of CAPE standards. Well, our view here is that because, so there were things and regulations that were sunset under the Public Act that was passed last spring that have to do with standards and processes for programs. And those have essentially been superseded by the agreement with CAPE, and the sort of requirement for all programs to be accredited by CAPE is something which is currently in statute. So our view is that there's no need to do anything further on that. That requirement already exists in law. That said, going forward, a couple of things to keep in mind. One is that one of the next set of obligations of this board is to take a look at program approval standards, and that's an opportunity to potentially think about, plus there's, I think the CAPE agreement is up for renewal soon. So there's a couple of opportunities there to think about whether the state wants to incorporate any state specific review elements, and like elements both in terms of the standards that are applied, but also in terms of the process that's applied when you consider those two things. And so that, I think, is something you might want to think about in the future. And then as we discuss down below in terms of the data system, there are a couple of CAPE there's a, I think we've talked about before the idea that CAPE requires data on completer effectiveness that right now the state isn't able to sort of report on in kind of like an apples to apples way. So there's different ways that programs are complying with that. And so that could be an area that this board looks at as an enhancement to the data infrastructure, but that's sort of, we get to down below. The 90-day certificate, I think you all had discussed last time that there's a good idea to keep that around for the sort of like limited number of programs that are using that. So we were just looking into if whether you'd have to do anything for that 90-day certificate to remain in place, and because it's already in statute, there's no action that's needed to keep the 90-day certificate. So we just confirmed that. And then in terms of the data system, I know that Ajit is here, and so I'm sure he'll have a lot to say about the dashboard. We were just sort of looking at where there might be opportunities to enhance the dashboard. So again, as a forward-looking thing, we have done a bunch of research on how other states have established common measures of completer effectiveness, and sort of tried to explain a couple of examples for that you might consider. And that, if you did decide that you wanted to sort of address that, we just recommend that there's, sort of a research and stakeholder-driven kind of process of landing on common measures. So that's the last section there. So let me just stop. And again, that one has a sort of longer memo that's linked in this cover memo. So let me pause there and see what questions there are.
All right, go ahead and raise your hand if you have any questions for section 1. Let's kind of keep the themes aligned so that we're not bouncing around too much. Does anyone have any questions on section 1? Okay, so in terms of section 1,
Jen,
I'm sorry, Shannon, I didn't see your hand there. My apologies.
That's okay. I didn't, when I clicked on the memo on the alternative pathways link, it said I needed access. So I just was curious about seeing the hyperlink.
Okay, we'll fix that.
We also have the separate memos, which we didn't share out because we didn't want to inundate with a lot of paperwork because we figured they were already linked in there. So if worst comes to worst, we can send out the separate memos.
Is anyone else having access issues there? Okay, Shannon, I'm going to make sure you're.
Shannon, I just granted you access. I think you should have access now. And anyone else? No, still no. Let me try again. I just tried. Yeah, I just tried it again.
If the CBRO folks want to just download the documents as PDFs, I can share them and then they can be uploaded to the site as well. That might be the easiest way to go about this.
I think we can do that. I think it shares that you sent the PDFs as well, right? In your email.
I did in the email, Chloe. Did you see those attached?
Yeah, there should be 3 attached memos. We just assumed that was going to be shared, I think, as well.
Yeah, I'll attach the PDFs.
Yeah, so there should be 3.
I think when we spoke as a group, because 2441, Public Act 2441 had kind of recently gone into effect, the general consensus of the group at the time, if I'm remembering correctly, was that we were kind of going to leave things as they were for the 2 years to kind of see how things pan out data wise with the already adjusted or newly adjusted or expanded certification endorsements. My question would be, with that in mind, what would be the recommendation that we could work through on either aligning it to regulation or putting it into regulation, what the guidelines are that SDE is currently using under the current expansion. So right now, I believe it is that they have to pass minimum content knowledge assessment, do their student teaching, get certified. Once certified, they would still do team. And after 10 years, they should have started or may have completed their master's to go to professional from initial to professional. And even within that, they can reapply for 1 year extensions up to 3 years. So I think we were going to kind of allow that process to run its course for about 2 years and then reevaluate what it looked like in terms of making any additional recommendations. What are your thoughts in terms of what our recommendation could be for this?
Jen, are you asking, like, if you were to develop these criteria, like how you would sort of like formally adopt those?
Right.
So our view is that, like, because there's like these alternative pathways are kind of contemplated by this part of the statute, that you could just, through guidelines, issue what those criteria would be, because the idea would be that you would be receiving proposals. The state would be receiving proposals for these alternative pathways. And so those guidelines would serve to put people on notice of what the criteria are that you would be using to evaluate whether or not those pathways, are sort of rigorous enough.
Okay. And you said research on criteria for cross endorsement is forthcoming, but that's for cross endorsement. In terms of going from provisional to professional, or from initial to professional, is kind of where our focus is, I believe, for this part of it.
Yes. And so
Yes.
what that memo includes is just some examples from how other states have like thought about what those alternatives could be.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions on that currently? All right. So for section, I'm not seeing any hands. I just want to make sure that I'm okay. So for section 12A2, alignment of educator preparation program with the revised endorsement codes. You had said endorsement codes are all set, monitor alignment over a 2-year period. So again, would that be something that we need to write up as a guideline or just a summary to report? Because we have to provide a report to the SBE by a certain date. So on this portion, we would just say that endorsement codes are all set.
And you would say that they're currently aligned, and that, as the sort of the elementary expansion comes into effect this July, the state would be monitoring for alignment. And I don't think anything additional would be necessary.
Okay, does anyone have any questions on section 2 to pose, or recommendations to mull over? All right, seeing no hands raised, we'll move to 12A3, which is adequacy and relevance of existing certification endorsement codes. So my question, I think here, let me ask, does anyone have any questions before I ask my question? Okay. So what is SDE's process for ensuring alignment, and what are the alignments to regulation and statute? Because part of this is that whatever's in statute, we want to ensure is also reflected in regulation, so that we're not kind of going back and forth, but that there's an alignment in this process. So SDE, do you guys have a formal process on ensuring alignment as kind of outlined by their report?
So our endorsement areas have not changed except for the addition of like pre-K and K. Elementary's gone back and forth. The same with expanding secondary down to grade 4. As of right now, all of our endorsements are aligned with what's approved by the SBE and also all of our ed prep programs in Connecticut. So if there were going to be any changes for that it's fine, but there would have to be a lot of discussion because we would need to be able to, update the system or making sure we're not, eliminating educators, but at the same time preparing our programs to be able to prepare their candidates for the appropriate endorsement.
So when you say that you already have a process, is it in regulations? Is it in statute? Is it guidelines?
Oh, it would be in regulation, yes. And so, but anything additional from 1998 would be either through SBE approval or through statute because, our regs back then, they specifically name each area. But since then, certain things like, for example, Mandarin Chinese or computer science, those have been added after the fact. Usually when we have a new type of endorsement code, before it's been approved by SBE or there's been a designation for a formal code for it, we'll issue it under a unique endorsement, which is our 110. And then there's a write-in on the certificate, what it specifically is for. And then once we have enough, feel from the field that it's needed or preparation programs starting to offer programming, we will then align an endorsement code to it officially through SB, through the State Board of Ed, or in this case, this board.
Okay, so the sunsetting of section 10-145D-44 through 10-145D-450 implicates these two sections, A2 and A3. So would we have to either amend or suggest new regulations to reflect statute then?
New regulations are definitely needed as they're sunsetted. I would think that the regulations for our new regs would encompass all of the statute to date as well. So that way we're working with a clean document. So with the regs being sunsetted, I believe the interpretation is that would be settled by the time the new regs were released.
Okay.
Do
Go ahead, sorry.
I'm just wondering, is it your view that if something is in statute, so if there is like a sort of comprehensive list that's updated in statute, is there, it doesn't seem that there's a need for additional regulation there.
Yeah, my understanding of what our task is to ensure alignment between statute and regulation and to provide guidelines and or regulations and or a legislation wherever needed.
No, but what I'm saying is that, part of the misalignment is because there's regulations and then laws are passed and then it's not like there's some stuff that lives in regulations or some stuff that lives in statute. And I think what we're saying is maybe better to have everything live in one place rather than constantly having this thing where some things are put into regulations, something they're put in statute, and you have to constantly think it like cross-reference the two. That was the point about consolidation. So like one potential thing you could consider is like just have everything in statute in terms of the endorsement codes, because oftentimes those like you were just saying, like since 1998, there's like these changes often happen via statute anyway, and so it might be easier on everyone if it's just like in one place. And given that it's likely that there will be statutory changes, that's why we're sort of thinking like statute might be the easier route for that. But Ben, you should chime in here because I know you've spent a lot of time thinking about this.
No, I think you nailed it. I think what we're hoping to avoid is a situation where statute continues to evolve and something arises and then we end up in a place similar to this 5 years from now, where we have to say we have to re-regulate to align to the statutes. And that is kind of, this process could be going on, indefinitely. And so we ended up now, 27 years after the last regulations, trying to figure out how to match them up to where the current landscape is. And obviously there've been intervening acts of the state board, like Kayla noted, to create new endorsement codes that weren't in the 98 regs, to create Mandarin, to create Portuguese, to create computer science. And so with the expectation that this is going to continue happening, and you don't want to have to go back and open up the regs continually, you might just want to have one statutory amendment that says, here are the endorsement codes, and then they're codified in one place. It's very easy to know where they are, and then any updates can be made through that process. You don't have to just draft regulations to align with the statutes. If you have it in statute, that should be sufficient.
And since you guys will be ongoing charged with recommending any necessary updates to endorsement codes, which you can do via recommendations for legislation, you would be able to advise on how those should be updated.
So it sounds, if I'm understanding, it sounds like the board should discuss and potentially vote on whether or not they want regulations or statutes. Correct? Or are you saying no?
Well, I think what we're recommending is that everything related to endorsement codes would just live in statute. And so there would be no need to reissue regulations. You could just have it in statute in one place. And as you monitor what's happening, what the needs are, you can recommend updates to the statute to reflect new endorsement areas, for example, or consolidations or streamlining, whatever it is that you decide is necessary in terms of endorsement codes. But it would just be easier for everyone because it would just be in one place. And it wouldn't require this cross-referencing. And what I was saying earlier is because it's probably the case that there will be legislation in the future addressing endorsement codes, which is why I'm saying it's best to just stick it in statute, because then you don't have to, then it's if a proposal comes along, it's being changed in one place versus having to to sort of update and align the regulations, which is sounds like a cumbersome process.
Right. So in regulation, should something be written stating that all cross endorsements will be codified and referenced in statute?
No, because basically the statute is the highest form of law. So if it's in there, you have the authority to issue those certificates. You don't really need to do anything else.
Okay. All right, perfect. Does anyone else have any other questions about that? Okay.
I would just say that, I'm sorry, I would just say that that's something that we should definitely connect with legal counsel for, because we've always had regulations and they've always been a part of a larger process with voting and with public input, which can happen through statute, but the process for regs is different in that regard. So I would want to confirm that with legal counsel before moving forward with something like that.
Okay, thank you. All right, does anyone else have any questions on that section? I think we're up to 12A3, correct? All right, and then we've got 4, which we have here as CAPE already required in law. Again, that comes up that question of, so it's already in statute, correct, or in regulation?
That one is in statute. Ben, do you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, there was a special act in 2016 that passed that required Connecticut to enter into a partnership agreement with CAPE for the purpose of establishing these procedures and systems for educator preparation programs. And so with that being the case, that kind of immediately superseded the regulations that had previously established certain procedures and systems for ed prep programs. And so the question just becomes, all right, since we are already requiring via statute ed prep programs to be accredited through CAPE, and the CAPE accreditation process establishes various requirements that all ed prep programs in the state must adhere to. Is there any additional work needed to make sure that CAPE is being implemented? And so at the moment, the answer there is really no. Like, the regulations were already superseded by the CAPE agreement. That CAPE agreement is mandated in statute. And so that is kind of already the law of the land in Connecticut. Then the question just becomes, what do we need to do to further implement the standards? And that would be where, the upcoming opportunity to revise the partnership agreement to consider the standards that are reviewed by the CAPE team and who participates in that review. That could be done through that mechanism. But in terms of are additional regulations needed, our view is that the statute requiring CAPE accreditation basically accounts for that already.
I see Shannon's hand. Go ahead, Shannon.
Yeah, so I would just say I think that's partially true. When the 2016 recommendations were made from EPAC to the State Board of Ed to move towards CAPE, it was almost a mashup of, yes, CAPE is the overseeing authority, but then there's still aspects of the original regs that are still in place, like the program approval review committee, which I was a part of until a month ago. I rolled off after I think a couple terms. So that still exists as both the new program review and approval body, and reviews the CAPE results to make recommendations to the state board regarding ongoing program approval. And there's still these 4 tiers of approval for new programs and continuing programs, and all that's still spelled out in those old regs. So it's almost like you need to still, it's like back to that reconciliation and streamlining we need to do. Like, it's the CAPE plus other pieces that are still at play, and this group probably needs to make some decisions about whether those steps still happen. Like, do we still need that review committee? What role does that review committee play? Is the membership of that review committee adequate, or needs to be spruced up or revamped? So I think there's decision points around this whole section that this group, the board, should be looking into. So it's good enough, but there's some smoothing that needs to happen. Yeah.
There is a separate requirement for the CERT board to look at program approval standards. And so we were not dealing with that here in 12A4. There's a little redundancy in the statute. And so we were not addressing the requirements that the CERT board look at the new program approval and continuing program approval standards. That's under a separate provision in 2441. And so you will have to do that. It is, something that you're going to have to consider, new program approval standards, and then specifically that concordance between CAPE's reaccreditation recommendation and what that means in terms of continuing program approval at the state level. So those are both things that the CERT board is required to look at, but that was handled under a different provision of 2441.
Thank you.
And it sounds like kind of similar to the previous one that Kaylin had pointed out, that we might have to have legal kind of take a look at what we would want to be reflective in regs as well as legislation. So we can definitely take that up with legal on their thoughts, and then make some recommendations with the assistance of CPRL on both those ends, should that be needed.
Yeah.
All right.
So just one point on that. I think that in terms of the conversation we were having earlier about consolidating endorsement areas in one place, it's not that you couldn't, if you needed to, and there was more additional detail about how you're implementing those endorsement areas, provide additional guidance. But the actual sort of the establishing the kind of the legal authority for those endorsement areas could happen in statute, and you could supplement what you need to supplement in other ways. But for sure, we should talk to the legal folks at SBE and talk more about that. It is we can also provide some information from other states in terms of how they use statute in this way.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Were there any questions on that? All right, so we're up to 5, which is the 90-day cert. Again, I think our recommendation is really going to come right out of the CPRO report. If the board votes on it at the end as part of our actions to retain that 90-day, it sounds like SDE is on board. And I think through our discussions at our last meeting and based on the needs of ARC, and until ARC adjusts their programming, that we would need that in place. And that can always be monitored and revisited. So is there any questions around that at this time? No. Okay, perfect. Now we're going to go down to section 6 and Ajit. I think you're on deck, my friend.
All right. Friday afternoon, right?
Yeah, you're breaking up.
Say that again?
As it said, you're breaking up a little bit.
Oh. I'm not sure why. Am I still breaking up?
I think you're okay now. That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So, how many of you were in the commissioner convened group last year, and from the board members? So I don't want to repeat myself and go over stuff that I already discussed in terms of what's there. I think the point that is being highlighted by the CPRO report is educator effectiveness. But before I get into that, I just wanted to at least take a minute to just show like what is currently available in the dashboard so that you understand like what is there and how that data actually come to be. And I'm going to share my screen. And I'll put a link to this in the chat as well, maybe when I'm done, so you can kind of look this up yourself. So on EdSite, if you go to educators, there's an Ed Prep option, and you actually get to a dashboard, this dashboard. And the way this dashboard comes to be is that the educator prep programs have to submit a roster of their candidates and completers as part of the Title II data submission, and ETS is actually the collector of that information. So the EPPs submit that information to ETS. ETS goes through a whole cleansing process and then gets the data file to SDE, saying here are the individuals who are submitted by the EPPs as completers and candidates still enrolled in the program. We then take that data and match it to a few things. One is the certification database, the CECS system that the department has, and also the employment database, which is the EDS or the educator data system, which tells us where these candidates are actually working, if at all, in Connecticut. Because not everybody who goes to a Connecticut EPP either lives in Connecticut long-term or seeks to work in Connecticut after they complete their EPP. So what you see here is sort of the result of that process. And I have to say that this is one of the most complex data sets that we end up dealing with because the data are messy. They're often incomplete. Things don't match all the time easily. There are duplicate records in the file. So trying to get to a clean data set is really difficult. But that said, what the dashboard contains multiple pieces of information, multiple tabs. You could see who are the candidates in our programs. You could see who the completers are. You can look to see what is the rate at which their completers are achieving certification. They're passing assessments. They are attaining employment and then staying in employment. And then there's a data tab that actually gives you more of the raw data, if you will, that underlies these dashboards. So you can actually, at a state level, you could see that we have about 4,600 to 5,000 individuals who are enrolled in our EPP programs. And just to be clear, these are initial certs, not cross endorsements or administrator certifications or special service endorsements. So these are those pursuing teaching endorsements. It shows you the enrollment by race, ethnicity, and one of the nuances in this data is that race is not required. And many of these candidates don't have a race ethnicity reported in the Title II data. So you'll see that, while 20% are persons of color, we also have 24% who actually did not specify a race of the candidates in the program. So you kind of deal with some of those nuances here. And you also get to see what is the, what is the gender breakout of the individuals in the program currently. And again, here, missingness is accepted in this data. If they end up actually working in public schools in Connecticut, or if we have their gender or race, if they end up getting certified, then we're able to garner that information, but otherwise we might not be. You can also break this out by individual EPPs. You can look to see who are our larger EPPs, who are our smaller EPPs, etc. You can break out each EPP by race ethnicity. You can look to see which EPPs have, again, we're in candidates. You could look to see that, or you could do gender. And you can pick individual EPPs and take a look as well. And then you get to completers. Completers are a subset of those who are candidates, because not all candidates complete because they're not at that point yet. So this is actually the number of completers. So if you're thinking supply, how many of our candidates are actually completing EPP programs in a given year? These are the numbers. About, it used to be about 1,500. It's down to about 1,200 now, this past year. And past year, these data are always lagging because by the time the EPPs get the data to ETS and by the time we get it, it ends up being early April. In fact, we just got the file from ETS for the 23-24 year that ended. So it'll take us a bit to match this data, clean it up, and get it up on EdSite so that you'll start seeing this 23-24 tabs here. Again, these are completer data, and you could see completers by race, ethnicity, by gender, also the same thing, by EPP, and then by EPP by race, ethnicity. So you could see which EPPs completers have greater percentages of candidates of color or otherwise. And there is, unlike student data where there is suppression of data because we have to protect student confidentiality, the educator data doesn't have, at least the basic enrollment information doesn't have that protection. So you will see some really small sizes, n sizes here. So for example, if if you go just counts, you'll see in this instance relay, there are 11 completers reported, as opposed to Southern, which reported 230 completers, and University of Connecticut, 157 completers. So you'll actually be able to see even very small N counts in this report. We then track the completers who go on to get certified in Connecticut. And we look whether they attain that certification within 1 year of completion. We look at test scores, passing rates, and these are the data that I have presented previously when I came in January to the board, talked about content area mastery and test scores. So we're only able to know that because we have this sort of complex system of matching data across these systems and seeing from the time of when they are in EPPs all the way through to certification and working in our districts. This licensure pass rate, you can actually break it out by assessment. So you can look at individual assessment pass rates. A few are selected here, but you have the entire list available. So if you want to probe and look within that, you could. We then track the employment of the completers. We look to see where they are working and what percentage of those completers actually end up working. So you could see that about 69% of the completers from 22-23 were working in Connecticut school districts 1 year after completing the program. And like I said, not every completer, especially in some of our private institutions and even our publics, end up actually working in Connecticut. And, you know, I was looking through CAPE Standard 4 as well. I mean, effectiveness obviously looks at how the candidates are doing in their districts, sometimes relative to student performance, but also relative to feedback from administrators who hire them or feedback from the completers themselves. But, you know, you can think of employment rates and actual persistence in our educator workforce also as a means of looking at how well is the EPP helping with educator supply and with our teaching force here in Connecticut. So that's just want to posit that. We also look at high need districts to say what % of graduates are actually working in high need districts. And high need districts are essentially, for this purpose, we use the Alliance District designation. So you could see what % of graduates are working there. You can also break this out by EPP and so on. And then we actually track the persistence 2 years after completion of the program and also 4 years after completion of the program. And again, we're able to do this because we can match the data using our employment information. So going back to prior educator EPP completion records all the way through to employment 4 years after completion. So that 4-year data is from 18-19 completers. So that's what we currently have in the dashboard. Getting to the this issue of effectiveness, again, there are a few ways in which CAPE speaks of effectiveness. One is student outcomes, and often the measures that are looked at is student growth on state assessments, and whether it be value add on state assessments or some measure of student growth on state assessments. And while that's that may be sort of the easiest thing to gravitate because it's something that can be measured, for which there is good data, it's important to remember that not all teachers who graduate from our EPPs are actually teaching in a subject and grade that ends up getting the state assessment. So while it's easy to measure, and a lot of analysts will speak of that, when you have numbers of 150 or even 10 graduates looking at test score gains, it becomes problematic as a matter of regular reporting. So one avenue for looking at that effectiveness, instead of sort of this annual reporting, would be to sort of conduct some sort of study. And we're actually engaged in some of those discussions with our partners from BU to explore that feasibility. When you pool multiple years of data, then you have a sizable number, and you can look at graduates across years and look at cohorts of data and look at longitudinal cohorts, which allows for a better measure. But again, that's not something that would be annual reporting. That would be like a one-time research study. And maybe that's where, if you're looking at test scores, that might be a place to sort of think of not necessarily adding it to a dashboard per se in a sort of annual reporting mechanism, but more as a specialized study. The other piece that I would throw that CAPE talks about is feedback from districts who employ these individuals. And I don't have all the history in this at the department, and maybe Kaylin, I don't know if you're still on. Yeah, I do see you're on. So I don't know if you're aware of the past history on this in terms of like trying to collect educator, administrator survey feedback on how the candidates are doing. And I know that was tried at some point, but the response rates were really poor. So I'm not sure of the history of that, but again, that's not a data collection that's currently done. But that's, again, all of these involve significant costs, and this dashboard had zero appropriation for SDE to develop. So this is, again, something that we have built out of just process and regular work and trying to sort of fit it in everything else. So I hope this gives you a sense of what this is. And if you want to pursue the effectiveness route, there are some options, but they're not all sort of, straightforward to just try to add it to a dashboard.
So Ajit, for the purpose of our statutory obligation, I appreciate the thoroughness of, presenting that information. for all those who are on here. I think we would need a report that we're able to submit to the State Department of Education on where we stand on each one of those statutory obligations of 1 through, I think it's 7, that were sent over for this part of it, including recommendations of conducting a study for the parts that are not yet established. So would
We can
that be
help you with
something?
that. We could totally help you with sort of getting a response for those items. Totally.
Okay, so what I'll do is I will have, towards the end of this meeting, I'll have this ad hoc committee vote on presenting that to the board at our next meeting, to have them vote on that information. Does that make sense?
So what would you need from me prior to that board meeting?
I'll let you know once we take the vote, but we also have ECE on here. I just want to make sure that we're able to get to that. Does anyone have any questions for Ajit before we move into ECE and talking about that birth to 3 information? And then we have a couple of possibilities for motions for the board to discuss and vote on for us to bring forward, for this ad hoc committee to vote on for us to bring forward to the board at the April meeting, which I believe you're also invited to, Ajit. All right, any questions? All right, again, thank you. And we'll kind of do a motion and then be in contact. Chloe will be in contact with your department on the things that we'll need for the April board meeting in a little bit over a week. All right, so we do have some members here from ECE to talk about and I appreciate your patience. There was a lot of things that we put into this meeting because we're trying to be as thorough and effective and really making sure that we're making decisions with a true understanding of what the expectation is here. So if one of those friends would like to go ahead and talk about their work.
This is Paige. So thank you for making time for us.
Thank you.
I will be honest and say I'm not exactly clear if this is like, you know, the 5 minutes at the 11th hour before the clock strikes midnight. So I'm going to try to not feel like there's only 5 minutes to like make a case for work that's been happening for like 5 or 15 years. And just say what I think is high level, probably helpful. Again, I just was trying to really make sense of those other reports. So I'm trying to connect to where you are, having not much time to do that. Not a complaint, just I would like to try to connect. So the 2 pieces of information you received was, one, just a call for a grant that Stephen Hicks. So I'm faculty at the University of Hartford. We are the only institution in Connecticut that has the full birth to 8 span at all flavors and always have integrated. And so we sit in this position of the full span. And so, but by the full span, I not only mean the ages, but as we talk about through NACCE, ages and settings. So my colleague Anne is at UConn, who is not a teacher preparation pathway, but an early education pathway. And so Stephen Hegedus and I, then Dean of Southern, we wrote with extensive early childhood community proposals for a grant that then Commissioner Cardona and Commissioner Bai co-signed for the concept of a jointly endorsed birth to 8 credential. So to your 12A something, it was a combination of the 112, 113, but understanding that it was undergirded by early intervention, as well as understanding that it would be promoting the workforce across settings. There's a lot more detail in that grant work that I'd be happy to share as appropriate. I just, at this rapid turn, I didn't get permission from people who I felt like should know before it became a public document. But the critical part there was, even then there was a concept of the agencies working together. Then the task force, out of that work came the task force. We literally, by the time everything was sort of said and done and the task force established, had about 3 months to turn around the report you're looking at. And so I think what's critical from what I hear is on page 9 and 10, there's just a summary table where we are talking about the birth to 8 endorsement. Again, speaking to the 12A, some number of the 112, 113. And then also the importance of interagency data. The workforce component in early childhood is challenging because of the way we span. The task force has other really important components in it, such as compensation. But I do think that is the key part for this conversation. I don't know if this is also something I'm allowed to make comment to, but when you were talking about statutes versus regulations, the regulations have served a really important element of detail and voice. I believe that who contributes to those regulations, I think Kaylin referred to this, who creates the regulations, who gets to comment on the regulations, and the level of specificity for operation and implementation is really critical. And I say that because as an educator, we know that even public schools are often, things are determined by people who are outside of the expertise area. And I have no illusions of great expertise, knowledge holding at this point in time in 2025, but I do think the regulations serve as a really important space, more between like on the ground and 10,000 feet, where we understand what we're trying to do and how we'll do it, which is different than the statute level regulations.
That's absolutely correct. And thank you for saying that. Like for our regs, for example, like one area is like maybe up to 2 pages of information to read through, to see different pathways, different options for the educator. So that's why, statute does speak to things, but it's very to the point and specific in some cases in bracketed language versus the regulations being a book, a large document that's referenced and voted on by so many other, public input over the years. So perhaps if there's a way that we can work languages that makes it easier to adjust them, might be an option. But in this case, like I completely agree, it's a much more detailed, thorough document than a piece of statute.
So for the purpose of this meeting and for that birth to 8 credential, what was kind of the timeline, or does anyone have any questions? Because we did review the document. We were able to get it at least a couple of days before for those who were able to review it. Were there any questions about it or at this time? So here, I see Cynthia Ritchie. Dr. Ritchie, go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. I was just curious if other states have this certification. And my second question is, how does the Connecticut Certification Office, the state leaders in the office feel about this?
I can answer that, Paige, or unless you'd like me to. You can go
Well,
ahead.
I would just, early childhood is always a little bit of a different category of depending upon how the state structures it, how unified the various agencies are. So I'll say that generally. And I do want to underscore also then where it is inclusive or not also varies. And then Kaylin, you can pick up from there.
As a part of our research when we were working on this, and it was over the course of some time, this particular birth to grade 3 or age 8, grade 3 would align with what, for example, New York has done in their state. They have these same similar, theirs goes to grade 2, but they have a students with or without disabilities, birth to grade 2, students with disabilities, birth to grade 2, and then student generalist B2 in the state. And much like, we had a legislative action that brought this committee together to research this, to have a more equitable early childhood experience, to build out our birth to age 21 continuum. So that's really what the work of this is. It was bringing in other states, what they're doing. Now, as far as leadership at the CSDE for this particular document, like it hasn't been like this document was submitted to the General Assembly. So there really hasn't been as much like voting or input, I would say, from the leadership. At least in my experience, I could be incorrect, but part of this work was at the direction of the General Assembly, and we created this. They created this document. I just supported a little bit for finalization and for public dissemination. So as far as maybe Paige can speak to what's happened since this report has been submitted, but I'm not knowledgeable, or even Margaret, of any legislation or anything that's passed since this report was conducted.
Not active legislation. I think it's a really good example, though, of where statute should meet regulation, where we can be responsive to the workforce and change, so that all of those answers wind up in one place, but that we value the input of, in early childhood, the full span of whether that's early intervention, birth to 3, home care providers, like there's the entire workforce there, center-based. So.
Okay. Do we have any board members currently who have any questions before we move out to any invited membership on the meeting? All right, seeing none. Liz, do you have a question? Oh, I think we lost you.
Sorry, can you hear me now? I'm not good at Teams. I was just going to remind folks, I think all of the importance, the comments have been really important about the level of detail that's captured in statute. Of course, that's really, obviously statutes are not built to provide all of the information you might need for implementation, but just wanted to remind folks that in addition to sort of in this hierarchy of law in our legal framework, we have statute, regs, and guidance or guidelines, and some of the information that you would want to capture that you wouldn't want sort of rigidified because there are flexibilities, they're still learning, there might be change that you want would be captured in guidance. And so didn't want there to be sort of a miscommunication, like we thought statute was the answer to everything. But as a reminder from the CECC process, the idea was sort of how do you capture in rule the framework that you're working in? And then by this body of experts, I love that point that was made, educators, administrators, and many of the folks who are on this certification board develop the type of guidance that would be needed to fully effectuate the framework that was codified in rule. So I just wanted to offer that point of clarification in case it was confusing. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, Paige, CEPRL's looking at some of this as well, and you guys already have this in place. If you were able to, what would your, when would you want to possibly come to the board to discuss a proposal? Should you have a proposal for us to discuss in terms of this section so that we can review it? Is there a proposal? Like, there's definitely recommendations in that document, right?
I apologize. I don't have the fuller sense of your arc. So two things. I would say at least a few weeks. Sure. Given that I found out like earlier this week I was coming today. Again, I'm really happy to be here. But so at least a few weeks. And then also would want to revisit that component that CEPRL spoke about, which is like, is there a provision for making sense of, I'm sorry, I won't capture it, but basically the idea of renaming or consolidating as is relevant and appropriate is sort of a cleanup rule versus like a full change rule. So it would help me to know what am I proposing in advance, because I think this comes out of sort of two different houses and is what was supposed to happen in 90 something when there was another potential reg change. So I would want to make sure I was proposing with colleagues and experts, other experts, a pathway that was viable. Because we've done this is how we can dream it, but I'd like to understand how we could land it.
Sure.
Especially
So
because it's already the ground is already shifting in terms of expansions. And so it feels like a really important moment to get this right and get it sooner.
So it sounds like we have a potential proposal for one of our sections if one of the board members wants to make it in terms of what CPRL had suggested and what you are saying right now to give us that flexibility, right, which we've talked about at length across board meetings. I guess the question would be, is anyone on the board looking to make a motion at this time to have a provision language crafted for the board to review on more flexible language surrounding endorsement codes and the flexibilities within them or expansion of them? Does that make sense? Like, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. I'm not legalese in all things. So
I think you're asking, do I have a proposal related to 12A3? CPRL folks check me, related to this creation of a new birth to 3 endorsement. And that based on your report, as I've been able to scan it during this meeting, is that there would be a mechanism to do that.
Right.
So we want to know what we're trying to do and how we do it.
Correct.
So I think just to clarify, if you were going to make a change to an endorsement area, I think the actual endorsement area should live in statute, or I know we've been talking about regulations versus statutes. We're just talking about the endorsement areas themselves. So the list, for example, that was linked earlier, where the SDE has basically very helpfully cross-reference statute and regulation, come up this is the list of endorsement areas. That would be in statute, so that when there's changes, it's in one place. And then if there's a need for additional guidance as to how, you are anything related to that endorsement area that you feel like needs more detail, that could live in your guidance documents. But just what is the endorsement code? If it were in one place, I think it would be easier on everybody.
So the proposal would really to make a combined endorsement, a new endorsement code.
Liz,
did you want to add on to that?
Yes, I was just gonna, I think this likely came up earlier, but in case it's helpful, part of this, the idea for sort of having a one-stop shop, an updated one-stop shop, which might not change all endorsement codes, but even sort of just put them in one place, came from the, when we were speaking with the agency, Jen, in preparation for this meeting itself, because it's very hard to go back through sort of all of the patchwork that has been done over the years. And Paige, if it is the request of this this group or Jen, we are happy to work with Paige to and the agency, the CSDE, to sort of put together language that would update the code based on whatever your decision is around those two areas and consolidate this so there's sort of a one-stop shop and it would be easier for you all to manage moving forward.
Okay, so we would
if that's what you want.
If that's what we want, we would need a motion from board members on this call. Doesn't look like we have a motion. So it may not be what we want at this time.
I can make a motion.
All right. So Cynthia, what would be the best language that you would like your motion to be exactly? Do you want Liz to restate that?
Sure, Liz, go ahead.
Okay, well, you could make a motion for CPRL to work with the agency and Paige's group to put together we'll just say language. How about that? Put together language that would help you effectuate having one location for the codification of all endorsement areas, and that list would be reflected to update the work that has been done around the potential consolidation of these endorsement codes, these two endorsement codes. Does that work?
Yes, thank you.
Chloe, does that work?
Yes, it does.
All right, perfect. Do we have a second? All right, Shannon has second. Do we have any discussion? All right, seeing no hands raised, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of moving the motion forward? Click your raised hand button. Okay, we have 5. So that's Patrice, Shannon, Cynthia, Margaret, and Elsa. Any abstention? I'm sorry, any against? Sorry. And any abstentions? I'll be the abstention for now. All right, the motion passes. So we got that part done, which was directly related to, was that 12A4? Is that what we said? Was it 3 or 4? 3, thank you. 3. Do we have any motions for 12A1, which was that criteria for proposals, alternative pathways to professional certification and cross endorsements at this time, based on the recommendations? Okay, none there. For A2, do we have any motions for alignment of educator preparation programs with revised endorsement codes? That was the one that we said that nothing really needs to be done, but we would probably just need to write up in our report the why. Is there a motion to bring 1 and 2 to the board for review in terms of the CPRL report? No motion there.
I can make a motion, Jen. I just don't know how to word it. I make a motion to bring 1 and 2 to the board to make a decision to help me out here.
All right. Do we have a second on that? All right, Cynthia is second. Do we have any discussion? All right, Shannon, go ahead.
I'm just curious. I just need a little more clarification. I don't quite understand what the action is. We're just
to bring 1 and 2 to the board with the CPRL recommendations to review by the board and have discussion on.
okay. I don't. So with 12A1, I don't. Maybe I'm missing something, but because I also just got access to the document today, is there a formal recommendation in there, or is it more that we need to discuss as a committee?
It's up to the committee to have that discussion. If you feel that there's more to discuss with the committee, then we can vote or amend the motion to maybe just be 2. If we want this committee to continue looking deeper into the documents that were linked for 1.
I guess the question's more for CPRL. Like, was there a definitive, because I haven't had a chance to read the 8-page document, is there a definitive recommendation for 1?
Definitive, I don't know how you define definitive. I think it would benefit from discussion. We proposed 2 criteria that you could use to determine which alternatives that you might want to have for progression to the professional certification. And we also provided examples of some of the most frequent alternatives that have been approved by other states. But I think we meant that for you all to consider and discuss. I will say.
I feel like
I don't know how you want. I don't know how you're defining definitive.
I guess I would just say that one has more meatiness to go through. So I'd love this group to take that time, maybe as a focus of a next meeting, and then bring it to the full board, because I think it's similar to the other subcommittee group that's actually potentially developing new guidance or guidelines for how someone could advance their certificate. So that one doesn't seem as transactional as some of the other ones.
And yes, Shannon, that's right. After you all do make a decision, that's the type of thing that if you all wanted, we could help you in drafting that guidance and stuff like that once you've decided on the substance that you want to move forward with. And I'm happy to answer any question. We are all happy to answer any questions you have once you've read the document.
Right. Is there potentially an amendment to the motion then to continue reviewing 1 and move 2 forward?
Does it make, I'm just not sure how this is to collapse this, but I feel like 4 and 5 are also pretty transactional. Can we move 2, 4, and 5 forward to the full board to just explain the current state and kind of clear them off the, am I missing something, April, if we did that? No, okay. So I would just modify it by I would recommend moving forward 12, 2, 4, and 5 to the full board with the current state explanation from the CPRO report to the full board, so we can kind of resolve next steps on those.
Okay, so that's an amendment to remove 1 from there, but move forward 2, 4, and 5. Do I have a second to the amendment?
I second.
All right, also seconds. Is there any discussion? All right, let's go ahead and put it to a vote. All in favor of moving 2, 4, and 5 to the board? All right, we have 5 of the 6. There are no nays, and there'll be 1 abstention, which is just me for now because I've been working with CPRO and I want to make sure that that's there. So, okay, so we'll move 2, 4, and 5 to the board. We'll put it on their April agenda for the 21st. In terms of 3, adequacy of relevance of existing, what is the action we would like to take on that? Is it further discussion? I think that Kaylin had made an argument about a good argument about talking with our legal department. So maybe we're holding off on that, and that's the update and the reasoning behind that for that one. And then, so are we good with holding on to that and putting it on our agenda for the next one? Okay, perfect. So we'll add a 3 for our next meeting. And then 6, that component, Ajit, thank you again for sharing that information. Could we get a actual vote by the board or a motion by the board or the ad hoc committee? I keep interchanging the two, my apologies, to request from Ajit's department a report including the information that he provided today on alternatives that are being researched at this time, so that we can present that to the board to kind of check off our number 6 on this as well. Elsa, are you going to be doing a motion? Your hand is up.
Sorry, that was from before.
No worries. Does this require?
I'll move that we ask that Ajit staff prepare that report for us.
Okay.
Sorry, Ajit.
Do we have any discussion? I'm sorry, do we have a second? My bad. Cynthia is seconding. Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll move this to a vote. All in favor of having Ajit's department prepare a formal report as specified in statute for 2441 required. Okay, looks like we've got our 5, and I will abstain again, so the motion has passed. All right. So Paige, we'll get in contact with you guys then with a good time and to kind of think about, I would say, reach out to CPRL and to SDE and kind of coordinate those parts for discussion. And then let us know like what an appropriate timeline is. I don't want to, kind of push things too far, but we can always report to the state that this is what we are doing as part of our report to the state without having a definitive answer or proposal in place necessarily. So I want to, give us some grace. We're trying to get as much done as we can within the timelines that have been provided to us statutorily. So with that in mind, we do have 2 more votes. We did not vote on the minutes at the beginning because we didn't have quorum at the time. We got quorum a little bit farther into the discussion, which allowed us to take all of these votes. So if you had some time to reflect on the notes from the past 2 meetings, I would need a motion to approve those notes or minutes. Anyone want to put a motion forward to approve the notes or minutes from our last 2 meetings?
I was only at the
Elsa?
last meeting, so I could make motion for one, but if someone was at both of them, they could do that.
Okay, was somebody, I think Elsa was at both, correct?
Yes, I'm trying to click
Okay.
myself out of. I motion to accept the minutes from the previous 2 meetings.
Do I have a second? Shannon, I think you were at both of those meetings.
Yeah, I left early from the second one, so I was just double check. I didn't do some of the votes at the end, but I think I can second.
Thank you. All those in favor of accepting, I'm sorry, is there any discussion? Okay, all those
Yeah,
in favor
Jen?
of, I'm sorry?
No, go ahead. There was something on the chat for you to read.
Oh, I did not see it. Let's see. I'm trying to monitor the hands. Yes,
I'll just ask, what is the timeline for the report that you're expecting from us?
I mean, our next board meeting is the 21st. Otherwise, it could be pushed to May if we needed to adjust accordingly. Because I think our ultimate end time is July is when our final report needs to be into SDE, so SBE. So it really depends on what your department is able to do, and we can certainly discuss that.
Okay, so I don't know when the May meeting is of the full board. That may be a more reasonable time frame because
It's May
just want
12th.
to give this May 12th.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely doable. Like, I mean, again, I'm not expecting a super exhaustive report, but more specific and to the point. Not that you
Perfect.
folks need pages and pages to read. So we'll keep it brief.
All right. Thank you, Ajit. So in terms of our vote, we just have to vote on the minutes really quickly just to get that out of the way. So all those in favor of approving the minutes, go ahead and raise your hand now. So we have four of. Is there anybody else on here? So 4 of the members who were in attendance at that time, Chloe, are voting on that. Is that sufficient for?
I think that's fine.
Okay, thank you. All right. Is there any further discussion or proposals that need to move forward? Shannon, you have a raised hand.
just slow on putting it down. I'm good.
Oh, sorry. Cynthia, you have a raised hand?
Yes, just a clarification. I didn't vote because I wasn't at the meetings, but do you have to count me as an abstention or a no vote?
I think that's a
I'll
question.
count you as an abstention.
Okay,
Because absent no vote is normally what
okay, perfect.
Robert's
Thank
rules
you.
requires. Yeah.
And then
And
my
mine,
my
mine was
second-
also.
Oh, sorry.
Just wanted to
Well-
make sure that Chloe grabbed that too, because I was in the same boat as you, Cynthia.
Yes.
Yeah. I have Margaret and Cynthia as abstentions on the minutes.
Thank you. And my second question is, will the CPRO reports that were presented today automatically go to the full board so that they can see them?
I think they'll be posted online and we can make reference to that as well if they want to, but if we're not putting forward to the full board all the items for proposals, it probably wouldn't be part of the full document.
Can I make a
Unless-
motion to have them be part of the full document, just to
It's
keep
just
the
gonna-
transparency and information coming?
I was just going to say, unless you make a motion to do so.
There you go.
All right, do we have a second on that motion to have all these documents included as part of our update to the board for this particular ad hoc committee? I see
second
3 seconds. All right, any discussion? Right, any conversation around it, discussion? All right, all in favor, raise your hand now. I will go ahead and add to that just to ensure I'm on it. So we have 5 in favor, and I think that is all of the folks that are on the meeting at this time as one of our people left. Is there any abstentions? Any not in favor? All right, it carries. So these will be included as part of our materials for our update to the board. Thank you, Cynthia. All right, are there any other questions at this time? We are over by about 17 minutes, and I would cater a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, and seconded by Shannon. All in favor? All right, that's 5. I believe the motion carries. I want to thank everybody for their time and good work around this and discussions. We appreciate it. I already have a follow-up meeting with CPRO on Monday to kind of discuss getting that stuff together for our April meeting. Anything that was voted on for us to move forward to the board today. So thank you all, and there'll be more materials coming soon.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you all.
You as